In and a very warm welcome to TGC's live AMA session. I am Garima Sood, part of Samagra, and we are also the organizing partner for TGC's inaugural edition. Before we dive into the agenda for today's session, while most of you will be aware, but let me set it up with some context before we dive into the agenda for today's session. So TGC is India's first national governance case competition for 30 premier business and public policy schools. TGC provides the best minds in the country an opportunity to engage with real governance challenges faced by India with the potential to impact millions of citizens. In its inaugural year, TGC is being supported by the government of Haryana, with Samagra as the organizing partner, like I mentioned, Unstop as the platform partner, and Print as the digital outreach partner. So for today's session, like you would have already known from the title, we are conducting an AMA on the case study and campus round submissions. We have Ankit and Ujjwal. Ankit is senior manager at Samagra and Ujjwal is chief of staff at Samagra. They will be taking you primarily through three major things, the journey that TGC has uncovered until at this point. They will also be walking you through the case study, which has been released as of 29 July. And they will be breaking it down for you to get an overall lens and understanding of how to approach the case study. Finally, they will be taking you through the solutioning, which is what is essentially the requirement for the campus round submissions and how you should approach the solutioning. So in a sense, how to tackle the video, the one pager, as well as what the evaluation criteria for this submissions will be. This will be followed by a Q&A session, which Ankit and Ujjwal, where they will be taking your questions towards the end of their presentation. So feel free to put in your questions in the Q&A chat box, and they will be happy to address the same at the end of the session. Finally, stay tuned. We also have upcoming event happening on Thursday, which is going to be done by Sagri Handa, who's also from Samagra. And she will be conducting a case workshop this Thursday, which will give you further insights and help you get a lens on the case study itself. So without further ado, I hand it over to Ankit and Ujjwal to take you through the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Garima. Welcome, everyone. As Garima already told, we also have Ujjwal with us, who would also be supporting us and answering all your questions that you people might have. Right. So Garima has already, in fact, told us everything that we need to cover. Let me just get started with the presentation. So what I'll do is I will, in fact, take 15 minutes to cover all this information. All of this information is already available on our various pages, and most of you would have gone through it. And then we'll open up for the questions from everyone, right? Challenge, we'll move to introduction to the case study, which is all contained in the document that you have already received, and then talk about the format of the submissions that need to come in, right? So starting with the journey itself, as Garima said, this is the first governance case competition in the country with the objective of galvanizing India's young talent, which is all of you, towards the governance ecosystem, right? In the inaugural year, we have 30 campuses. So initially we had 25 campuses, and then we had 5 more wildcard campuses join us, and we have submissions from all of them. There are basically 3 rounds through which the submissions will go through. The first one is the campus round, where basically all the teams which have registered from these campuses, they will submit in their 3-minute executive pitch video and a supporting one-pager. 1 team from each campus would be selected, and then 1 to 5 teams from the wildcard campuses would also be selected for the nationals round. The nationals round will then essentially have 26 teams, which will get an exclusive exposure to change makers from the impact ecosystem. They will make their presentations finally to a panel of IS officers and industry leaders. This would be an online round. And from this nationals round, we'll select 6 teams for the finale, which is the summit, as we call it. Now, these 6 teams will get one-on-one mentorship by 1 industry mentor and 1 government mentor. They will also get exposure to the nitty-gritties of the state and district level governance through a 2-day curated immersion visit that would be organized for them. And finally, they would get to present their solution to the chief minister and impact investors at the summit, which is an offline event. Now, when we talk about the prize money, basically the winner gets 5 lakh rupees, the first runner-up gets a 3 lakh rupee check, and the second runner-up gets 1 lakh rupees. All the 6 finalist teams receive a PPI opportunity with Samagra. Talking about the round one submissions, so we closed the registrations on 29th of July. We have 2,100 plus teams which have registered and 6,400 total participants that have registered for the first round itself. We are right now in the case study submission phase. So 29 July is when we release the case study, and till 7th of August is when you can submit your proposals. 15th August is when we would announce the teams which have cleared the campus round and have moved to the nationals round. 2nd and 3rd September is when the nationals presentations would happen. Post that, 29th and 30th September is when the selected 6 teams will get the governance immersion visit conducted. And finally, on 1st of October, the selected teams will get an opportunity to present their solutions to the Chief Minister of Haryana. Right. Coming to the case study now. So I'm sure you have already heard that we will in each year cover one governance domain and one state. For 2022, we have Haryana as the state and livelihoods is the domain that is being covered in the governance case. The problem statement that has been articulated in the case is that what can the government of Haryana do over a decade to make its youth future ready, right? This is the broad case, and then it has also been broken down into very specific things. So the detailed problem statement reads something like this. What can the government of Haryana do or facilitate over the next 10 years to ensure the readiness of its youth for relevant livelihood opportunities, both inside and outside the state in a sustainable manner, right? Let me point out some keywords here and let me explain those so that all of us are on the same page regarding those. The first thing is do or facilitate. So what essentially we are looking for is that there are a lot of interventions that the government can directly undertake, but there are also a lot of other things that the government can facilitate to be done by the private sector, right? So government acting as a regulator for the private sector can also create an enabling environment where basically they facilitate the actions from the private sector or nudge the private sector to act in a certain direction. Right. So do keep that in mind when you're coming up with your own solutions, that there are certain things that the government does, but also facilitates the private sector as well. The second thing is creating readiness for relevant livelihood opportunities. So what the government is targeting to do is that 10 years from now, they want to ensure that the youth in the state have a skill set, which is, and basically the qualifications which make them relevant for the opportunities that exist at that point in time, right? And when we talk about livelihood opportunities, it could be jobs, it could be self-employment opportunities, it could be any kind of opportunity which leads to some kind of income generation. So we need to ensure that the youth has acquired the kind of qualifications and the skills which are relevant for any kind of livelihood opportunities 10 years from now. The third piece is youth. And when we say youth, we are talking about 18 to 25-year-olds 10 years from now, which would essentially mean that these are people which are in the age bracket of 8 to 15 today, and would be in the age bracket of 18 to 25, 10 years from today, right? So we have to focus on what can be done for them over a period of 10 years to make sure that they are ready for relevant livelihood opportunities 10 years from today. And the fourth important piece is sustainable manner. So what we need to ensure is that we undertake interventions that create outcomes year on year. So these are not interventions that work for a particular year and then we have to think of something new. We have to think of solutions which keep creating impact year on year, right? So this is the breakup of the case study. Talking about the scale of this, so we are roughly talking about 4 lakh people who enter Haryana's workforce every year, right? And they come from various sources, they come with various educational backgrounds. So the first bucket is people who did not even go to school or maybe did go to school, but decided to drop out by 10th standard and then join the workforce, right? So the current estimates are around 33,000 such people every year join the workforce of Haryana who have qualifications essentially up to only class 10. The second bucket of people would be, let's talk about the students who have completed their 10th standard in school. They could either continue in the schooling ecosystem, complete their 11th and 12th, or they could take admissions into ITIs or even other diploma courses, right? So some students would continue in the school, but still drop out after completing their 11th standard or maybe in between also. And some would, after completing 12th standard, still want to drop out and want to take up a job. So that number is much larger. That is around 90,000. Then we talk about students who have gone to ITIs and they have graduated from there. That number comes to around 40,000. Then we talk about people who have completed their 12th and then go on for higher education. So they go on to do BA, BCom, BSc, BTech courses and even master's courses as well, right? That is a huge chunk. That is a larger number of 1,55,000 people who complete these kind of higher education courses and then join the workforce. Diplomas is a smaller number of around 13,000. And there is a dropout from all of these institutes, right? All of these higher education colleges. So people going to ITIs or degree or diploma colleges, they also tend to drop out sometimes in between. And that is again a sizable chunk of 54,000. So this gives you a rough estimate of 3,85,000 people who are joining the workforce every year today. This number is obviously supposed to grow every year as we see the population growing and as we see number of people enrolling into colleges also growing. So this number is set to increase over a period of 10 years. We are talking about roughly 40 lakh youth who would be impacted by the initiatives that all of you would come up with, right? Talking about now the submissions. So we're very clearly talking about two kinds of submissions that need to be made. The key submission is the 3-minute executive pitch video, which would be supported by a one-pager. Let's first focus on the video. So the video, as we see, has 3 parts to it. So the 3-minute video is broken down right now into 3 parts. The first one is the 30-second thing where you summarize your own understanding of the problem statement. So while a larger problem statement has been given, it is up to the teams to think through what could be the real challenges that are being faced on the ground, which would, which need to be solved for and then would lead to the achievement of the outcome. So summarize your understanding of the problem statement in the first 30 seconds. The next 2 minutes is where you capture your solution and your ideas. So the lens here that you need to take is think of a larger solution approach, and then think of what could be the 2 or 3 game-changing ideas under that larger solution bucket. How could they be implemented? What are the key stakeholders within those ideas and solutions that you need to cater to, right? So capture all of that in the next 2 minutes. And then the last 30 seconds would be summarizing the impact outcomes. So what do you think would be achieved because of these solutions in the next 10 years is something that you need to capture there, but also take the lens of understanding what could be the short-term wins there. So there would be some things that would be unlocked maybe even 2 to 3 years from now. And those are really, really important to even create some kind of momentum on the ground, right? So when you're working with the government, when you're working with the people, it is necessary that you do not just keep telling them that something would be achieved 10 years from today, but also have some wins which are achieved within 2 to 3 years from today or within 5 years from today, right? So those would be necessary. There are certain requirements with respect to the format. The first one is around the time limit. So it is the maximum time limit is 3 minutes. Let's please ensure that you adhere to that. The videos must be in landscape format. They must be uploaded on YouTube with privacy as unlisted, and then you share with us only the YouTube link for the video. And finally, it is up to the teams to decide how many people should be present in the video. It could be all of them, or it could be just one of you, right? Talking about now the supporting one-pager. So with a one-pager, again, there are 5 things basically that you're covering in the one-pager, starting with the problem hypothesis, which is the same thing. So your understanding of what the problem is and what the key challenges are that you need to solve through your solution should be captured in the first part. Then you talk about the solution. So what is the larger solution approach that you're taking? And within that, what are the 2 to 3 key ideas that you believe are the game-changing ideas that would lead to some kind of change? The third thing that you need to cover is think through what are the different stakeholders that are involved in the implementation of the solution. So just to give you an example, just think of something which is to be done in schools. The key people involved would be the students. Then there would also be the teachers. There would be certain people who are involved at maybe the principals, then people involved in monitoring the schools at a district level. And then there's also an education department running the whole education ecosystem in the state, right? How are all of these people involved and what are the incentives or the value propositions for all of them to be working towards the same goal? Think through that. The next part would be the impact outcomes. Again, think of both the long-term and the short-term impact outcomes that would be accrued from the solutions that you have envisaged. And finally, the fifth part would be the risks. So what do you think up to 5 risks basically that could occur when you start the implementation of these solutions? And also think through what could be some of the mitigation strategies for that, right? So what are the risks that you envisage and how could they be mitigated? Again, there are certain recommendations with respect to the one pager that you create. First, let's be very, very clear on the objective of the one pager, right? So the requirements, all of them need to be clearly communicated through the one pager, and the solution should clearly come up. And it is essentially supporting content-wise the video that you have created, right? There is a sample one pager that we have also linked with the case study. It is essentially a dot dash format. So there are bold dots, right, which should clearly in themselves create the whole story that you're trying to tell. And the dashes are basically supporting the dots. So the dots, so the dashes essentially should, in some cases, also quantify the things that you have mentioned in the dots, right? So there are broad dots covering the main story, and then there are dashes within each dot which support the argument that you have made through the dot, right? Idea would be that all of you stick to one page, do not go into the second page, right? And when you're creating these dots and dashes, try and summarize them within one line. Let's not go into 2 lines. Advisable is that you keep all of them into one line so that that becomes more readable and consumable in that way. Right. So this is basically about the 2 submissions. Then we're talking about what are the things that we would be evaluating. So there's a solution feasibility matrix that we have created. There are 6 things that come here. The first thing is that these ideas that you come up with should be game-changing innovations. Now, this is something that I think a lot of people wanted clarified. It has also been very clearly mentioned in the case study as well, but game-changing innovation is something that we are saying that is not some routine things which are happening in the government, right? Or very, very small incremental things that we need to do. The idea is that you bring something very, very novel to the state. So something which has never been tried by the state would be one thing. There could be solutions which have been implemented in other states or in other countries, but you think they are new to the state. And that is also considered innovation in this case. The third thing that is being considered innovation is a complete process renewal, right? So there are schemes which are being implemented maybe in the government, but you believe that the process which is being followed to implement these schemes right now leaves a lot to imagination, right? And there are things that can be done to certainly improve it. And those process, basically re-engineerings could also be considered game-changing innovations in this case. Coming to the second one, that is socio-political desirability. So this is basically understanding if these solutions are based in the context of Haryana, so that the people of Haryana will accept the solution. And there would also be political buy-in to implement those solutions, right? So think of what is needed in Haryana. What is it that is desired by the people of Haryana? What will work in the context of Haryana, and then create those solutions. The third one is around at-scale implementability. The idea here is that all of you basically think through solutions which work at scale for the whole population of Haryana. We will not be creating solutions which work only in pockets, let's say something that works only in maybe Gurgaon, but does not work in districts like Mahendragarh and Sirsa, right? So keep that lens, and also think of solutions which do not only work for one particular society, one particular class of the society. So we are not working only for people who are in the high income group or only in the low income group. The solution should be scalable, should work for all kinds of population that are in the state of Haryana, right? The fourth one is a win-win for stakeholders. Again, when we move into the implementation of these solutions, the challenge that generally comes up is that there were not enough incentives created for all the people who would be involved in the implementation of that particular solution, right? So think through what are all the people who would be involved when you think of a solution, and what are the incentives for them to make sure that this solution actually sees the light of the day. So create those wins, create those incentives when you're coming up with a solution for different kind of stakeholders that are involved. The fifth one is financial viability. So we cannot be coming up with solutions like, for example, a farm loan waiver, right? Which is basically just pumping in a lot of money year on year, leading to not a lot of socioeconomic benefits. So think through what are the solutions which, with whatever budget requirement, they come up with positive externalities and also positive socioeconomic benefits finally, right? It would be wise to think of solutions that basically do not entail a lot of financial expenditure, but even if they do, think of all the other socioeconomic benefits that would accrue from the solutions that you come up with. And the final is national replicability. So while the solutions right now would be grounded in the state of Haryana, it would be wise to think of solutions which can then be replicated across different states. So if we were to take the same idea to a different state with some contextualization, we should be able to replicate that elsewhere, right? So not while it has to be contextualized for Haryana and it needs to have some socio-political desirability for the local region. Idea should be that basically the ideas that are nationally replicable would basically gain more mileage, right? And then finally coming to the case workshop that Garima initially talked about, Sagri would be doing one workshop on Thursday, 6:30 p.m. The link has already been shared with all of you, so do register for that. The lens that we are taking there is basically how you can approach solving a governance case, right? So how do you come up with problems and how do you identify solutions is something that you would get to learn in that workshop. And now I think we're open for questions.
Thank you so much for that, Ankit. I hope this provides clarity to the teams in terms of what is expected from the case study and the campus round submissions. Now, as Ankit mentioned, we're open for Q&A, and definitely we're getting some really interesting questions in the chat box. So let me just begin from the first bucket that we have. So we have a lot of questions around case study. So the first one is around the fact that can we take inspiration from projects that are implemented by other state governments in countries? So over to you, Ujjwal and Ankit.
Yeah, I can take this one. So yes, you can take inspiration from other projects. So anything that's happened in any other state in India or globally, as long as you can contextualize the solution for Haryana. If it can be embedded in this context, if you feel it will work, then it's fine to kind of take inspiration from anything game changing, like Ankit mentioned, that has happened anywhere else in the world. Yeah.
Great. The second question that we have around case study is, are we focusing on livelihood opportunities from any particular sector or industry?
So I can take that one. So we are totally industry agnostic or sector agnostic, right? But just take that lens of at scale implementation. Whatever industry you choose or whatever sector you choose, ideally we should be agnostic to the sector or industry, but think of again at scale implementation, right? Like the things that I talked about. It cannot be catering to a specific region within Haryana. It cannot be catering to a specific section of the society. So we'll have to basically be very broad based and think of all sectors, all industries, or at least majority sectors and industries.
Great. The next question is around generally the qualifications. So by qualifications, do we mean competence and skills or also like a certification, degree, etc.?
So
yeah, we can.
Yeah, those are two things that we have continuously mentioned in the case study document also, and while I was speaking as well. We're talking, when we talk about readiness, we are talking about qualifications and skills. So when we say qualifications, it is mostly certification, degree and all. But when we talk about skills, then we are talking about the actual competence of those people, right? So we need to focus on both of them when we talk about readiness. How do we ensure that the people have the requisite qualifications and skills to be able to, take up the relevant livelihood opportunities 10 years from today.
Great. The next question is around generally the scale. So is our focus only on these 3.85 lakh youth, or do we also include those who are not part of this, suppose who dropped out before class 10th?
Yeah, I can take this one. So as we've mentioned in the case study, the idea of giving distribution of these 4 lakh youth per year has been to say what all are in your control, which all ecosystems are in control, whether it's school, whether it's colleges, whether it's vocational institutes, just to give a purview of what is in your control. But if you can come up with solutions that can impact people who are not in these institutions, please do go ahead with that. So there's no restriction that you only need to focus on these 4 lakh youth who are coming out of these institutions every year, but just to give you a sense of what all levers you have in your solution to be able to kind of come up with those ideas. But you can go beyond those also who have dropped out of these institutions or who never entered these institutions essentially.
The next question is generally around the timeline perspective. So, as you mentioned, it has to create effect year after year. Don't you think after 10 years, there might be a different skill set, and maybe after 20 years, there's a different skill set? So, how do you suggest we can go about it?
Yeah, I can take this one. So that is a very, very relevant point. Yes, the skill set required 10 years from today would be very different from what is required. 10 years from today would be different from what is required today, and 20 years would be significantly different, right? It would be a great idea to think of solutions which basically enable the government to align their skilling ecosystem to the required skills at that point in time, right? So that could be one part of the problem, that how do we identify skills that are needed 10 years from today? And the second part would be, how do we train people so that they are employable in the skills, basically with the skills required 10 years from today? The third would be, which is something that this question talks about, how does the government basically keep identifying those skills and keep revising their strategies to whatever is required in the future, and not basically being, the idea is that they should not be reactive. They should not think about, okay, this is something that has already come up and now we are reacting to it. How can the government be more proactive about their own skilling and education strategies is something that we need to think about.
Great. So the next question is generally around the nuances that the case study sort of adheres to. So this question is around there being some guardrails, nuances that are mentioned in the case study, like caste, gender, bias, etc., and whether these should be factored into the solution design. If yes, what are some reasonable assumptions that can be made?
Yeah, I can take this one. So this should definitely be included while you're thinking of solutions, but just one thing to watch out for, that you don't think only for a very specific set of population, thus cutting down on scale. So just ensure that your solution remains relevant to the large part of the population. Within your idea, you may want to do some specific interventions, which you can also kind of think through before the nationals, that help a lot more people from the disadvantaged communities to come on board for that solution to be relevant for them as well. Some extra support for that idea to be relevant for them, but don't just ensure that your idea is not limited to a certain population, because then that would not be relevant for a majority population. So again, just stress test against those feasibility matrix. We do want that there is that political desirability, win-win for different stakeholders. So we want to maximize that so that the idea does go through, and then we can go ahead.
Great. So the next question is around the game-changing ideas itself. And this person asks, can the ideas be complementary to each other as an assortment of the strategies working together, or do they need to be distinct?
I can take this. So definitely they can be complementary to each other. I think that is something that we would encourage. Generally, point solutions in themselves have limited impact. Idea would be that you come up with basically solutions which are complementary to each other and work in tandem to basically create something which is a larger solution that you envisage. Having said that, even an assortment of strategies is also fine. The idea should be that you are able to articulate it well enough and come up with some outcome, basically, which these strategies could enable. So even if you come up with 3 complementary solutions, you have to clearly articulate the outcome that could be achieved from that. If it is an assortment of strategies, even that is fine, as long as you think that there is some sizable outcome that could be achieved through these assortment of strategies.
Great. So I'll paraphrase the next question, given there's a lot of nuances to it. So the overall essence that the question is asking is, what are some of the ways to deal with issues that are only sort of known to bureaucrats and officials in the system? So from a very system perspective.
Yeah, so I can take this one. So we could read the question where you're thinking in that there are tenders that happen slowly in the government. There are multiple constraints that may happen operationally while you implement your solution, but just keep in mind that you will be presenting the solution to the chief minister of the state. So all of those operational battles or administrative battles is something that you can overcome. So you don't need to be constrained by that, as long as it's not kind of course, kind of boundaries of legality are not being breached. As long as that's not happening, just don't be constrained by any administrative hassles that you may be imagining may come in your way, because you are presenting to the topmost person in the leadership who can kind of ensure that the system goes through smoothly with your idea.
And to just add to that, there are 2 things that we're also focusing on, right? One is the political desirability of this. right? So if there is political backing, then these operational issues are not really issues. The second part is we are also thinking of the win-win for stakeholders. If we strongly believe that there are enough incentives for the bureaucrats and for the officials to get the solution implemented, they will figure out the ways of circumventing whatever delays occur, right? So don't think of these things as, basically blockers, but you have to think of what could be the incentives for the different people involved, so that they basically take initiative to circumvent all of these problems.
Thanks for that, Ankit. So moving on to the next question, this is generally around what sort of elements need to be included within the case study itself. So this question is, do we need to provide financial model and scale, or is it just providing an implementable solution?
So I'll take that one. So the focus is more on the implementable solution, of course. We do not really need a financial model right now. It would be good to still have an estimate of what do you think would be the expenditure required there, right? And that would also help you in your minds justify if this is a financially viable solution. We cannot be coming up with a solution which essentially means that the government is spending on your solution more than their education budget or more than their annual skilling budget, right? So think through that lens, but do not provide a financial model as of now. That is not required.
So the next question is around the fact that can we target problem areas relating to current infrastructure and quality of education in schools, or are we supposed to focus on skill development, assuming that the government has already provided good infrastructure and quality of education?
Yeah, so on that, you can just take this one. So you can get into quality of education also if you feel that's a blocker for the type of skills that the child through the schooling journey needs to gain to be relevant for the opportunities thereafter. Like we have kind of shown in the case study, there are people who exit the school system at certain points and directly enter the job market or the entrepreneurial route. So even what's going through in the school journey is also relevant. And on infra, if you feel it's relevant to what they are gaining out of their school experience, then do kind of spend your energy on thinking about infra as well.
Yeah. And there I would also encourage everybody to do some research to find out what do you think are the real problems, right? And that is something that the first part of your solution would entail, or first part of a submission, which is your articulation of the problem statement. What do you think are the real blockers? What do you think are the real challenges which are inhibiting this basically readiness of the youth for the next gen skills? So if you think there is some problem at the school ecosystem level and there are problems at the infrastructure level itself, then we need to solve for it. So it's a totally basically the team's call to first figure out what do you think are the real challenges and then come up with solutions for that, right? The infrastructure could be one, of course.
Great. So the next question is around the age brackets or the target, particularly the target audience. So this question asks basically, given that there are 3.85 lakh youth that we're sort of focusing on, if you can sort of reiterate what are the age brackets that we're looking at.
So the age bracket, as the definition of youth we have provided, right? It is 18 to 25 is the population. I think rightly mentioned that the people that we were talking about right now, which form the workforce in Haryana, that is a larger number. That basically caters to a population of more from 14 to 30, because we're talking about people who have dropped even before 10th standard, and we're also talking about people who have now entered the job market after completing their post-graduation. For the purpose of this case, we would be only focusing on a population of 18 to 25. Right, which essentially means, as we've also specified in the case study, people who are right now in the age bracket of 8 to 15. So think of their whole journeys over the next 10 years, and that would help identify what could be some pain points through this journey for people when they enter basically the workforce.
Great. We definitely see some good engagement on the question, so definitely keep those coming in. Meanwhile, moving to the next question. So there are some basically more questions on identification of skills that are relevant in the next decade. So since these could sort of keep changing, till what extent should the solutions be focusing on hard skills?
Yeah, so I can take this one. So it's not necessary to stick to hard skills only. If you feel, say, entrepreneurship is something that's going to take more shape or kind of get deeper in the coming years, then soft skills will also be as relevant. And even for certain industries, which you feel will take more shape in the next 10 years, both soft skill and hard skills will be relevant in this case. So it's not necessary to stick to hard skills, but just think about the industries which you feel will be more relevant. Industries or jobs or basically entrepreneurial kind of options that would be more relevant in the next 10 years, and accordingly think about what are the set of skills, not restricting to hard skills.
Yeah. Flowing from this, I think there's a very similar question, which is around the fact that as 4 lakh people will enter the workforce, are we assuming that everybody has a job, or will they be looking for a job opportunity?
So yes, most of these people will basically be looking for livelihood opportunities, right? We are saying that these people have joined workforce. So let's say, for example, the people that we said that are who have joined the workforce after 12th standard, these people have definitely not gone for some kind of higher education, right? So most of these people are looking for relevant livelihood opportunities. Now, these livelihood opportunities could be a job opportunity, or it could be some kind of a self-employment or an entrepreneurship opportunity. So yes, basically all of these people are looking for some kind of livelihood opportunities, and we need to cater to all of them, essentially.
I think we have also very similar questions generally around livelihood. So I'll take those up. So the next question is, are we looking at relative increase in livelihood or absolute?
So yes, we're not talking about increase in livelihood per se, right? There is no relative or absolute here. As somebody had already asked, I think the question is more focused around the changing economic landscape 10 years from now, right? Which means that the kind of livelihood opportunities available 10 years from now would be very, very different from what they are today. And that would essentially mean that the kind of skills and the kind of qualifications required 10 years from now would also be significantly different. How do we prepare, or how do we ensure the readiness of Haryana's youth to take up those opportunities, not only within the state, but also outside the state, is something that we need to focus on, right? Even if the idea would be that, again, if I have to talk about specifically this relative or the absolute increase, it should be an absolute increase, definitely. But yes, so basically it has to be an absolute increase in the number of people who are basically taking up relevant livelihood opportunities 10 years from today, something that we should essentially target. But when you're solving this, focus more on the readiness aspect of it than the actual linkage to livelihood opportunity.
Right. So there's just next question around solutioning itself. So the the case study basically asks to list up to 5 problems. Should our solution approach involve providing solution to all the 5 problems identified?
You'll take that, Ujjwal?
Yeah, you can take this one.
Yes. So yes, please do identify how many other problems you can. It could be more than 5 as well, and you are, welcome to do that. It is okay if you do not cover all of them, but I would suggest that if you are coming up with a problem statement, it is good. You can maybe omit that as well if you don't think there is a solution to it. But if you idea would be that you focus on problems that you think are solvable through the solutions that you provide. So if you believe your solutions only cater to 3 problems, it's advisable to just focus on talk about only those 3 and then talk about the solutions for those 3.
Yeah, adding to that, the problems which you feel are solvable, and out of those 5 problems, for sure, you will have a perspective on these are the biggest pain points. So just keep that perspective while you're thinking of those ideas, both feasibility of your solution and what you feel is the biggest pain point that can really transform or help us achieve the outcome that has been outlined in the case study.
Great. Now I think we'll just switch gears and sort of cover some more questions related to the campus round submissions itself. So the first question here is, if there are some statistics based on which we have arrived at the solutions, how do we address them in the video and the document, as they would consume time space?
Yeah, you can just hyperlink all the kind of references that you're using while figuring out those statistics. And if there is some detailed kind of calculations or estimations that you have done, feel free to kind of attach as a supporting collateral rather than putting it in the one pager itself. But use hyperlinks, both external links as well as something that you want to create and explain in your solution, please feel free to do that.
We have a slightly technical question here with regards to the video submission. So in case of a video submission, is it necessary to be virtually visible in the video, or a video clip with the presentation and voiceover should work?
I think ideal would be for you to be there in the video to explain the nuances that you want to cover in the one pager as well, right? I think that is something that we would prefer at this point in time instead of a presentation with voiceover.
Yeah.
So let's leave that out. Let's have you there pitching the solution essentially and covering the nuances that you think might not be covered in the one pager as well.
And
The content.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just it's a choice of the team if one or all team members need to be in the video, but we are not looking at a presentation right now because we will get there in the nationals round. So you can kind of avoid doing that fully.
Great. I think the next question is also slightly more technical with respect to the one pager, and I think this should provide good clarity to people as well. Can we have an appendix for the one pager?
I'm not encouraging that as of now. I would request all of you to basically limit to that one page limit and that 3-minute video. There might be certain links that you might want to provide, as Ujjwal had pointed out, to some external sources of data, which you have referred to. I think that should be fine. But apart from that, refrain from adding any appendix as of now.
Following from that, I think there's also somebody who's seeking clarity on the dot dash part of the format of the one pager itself. So between Ankit or Ujjwal, if you can sort of shed some light on it as well further.
Yeah, so on this, basically a reference document has also been attached, which explains what the format is. Larger idea is that whatever you're mentioning in your dots kind of lays out what's your thinking at a macro level, and each of the dashes help explain or validate or reinforce what you mean by those dots. So that's the format that has been provided. If you go through, you will be able to kind of get it. But yeah, happy to answer in case there's any confusion in the reference collateral that has been shared for the dot dash format.
Great. I think there are definitely several questions coming on the format of the video and the infographic itself. So like Ujjwal mentioned, I think it'll be best if teams can go through the reference documents. So much of your questions related to whether visuals have to be added or infographics, etc., can be covered in those. Otherwise, feel free to drop us an email at query@thegovernanceChallenge.co.in. Moving to the next question. This one is about, again, one pager, but more focused on the solution itself. Do we need to mention about implementation of solution in one pager or just the solution as of now?
I think implementation will take more space. If you can, it would be good. But right now, I do not see the space to actually explain the whole implementation of that. So for now, I think the focus should be more on what do you think the solution is and what do you think could be the incentives for different people to actually take up that solution instead of going into the detailed implementation of that. I think that would be covered in the subsequent rounds.
Great. So I think generally there are some questions on where people can find the resources. So there's one question around generally where we can get links to the workshop and the event that TGC org team is conducting.
I think all of those resources, most of those. So first of all, coming to the sample one pager, if you go to the case study document, it is linked there, the sample one pager. There are also references to a lot of other data sources. I think everybody should take a look. Let me, in fact, should I share my screen and quickly show that? Let me do that, in fact. Yes.
Sure. And with regards to the workshop links and everything else, you will keep receiving mails from Unstop as and when relevant events are scheduled. Yeah, over to you.
Yes. So this is yes, this 1 minute or this is basically the case study that you would have received. The submission is to be done on the TGC Unstop page. The link is here. Then coming to how do you change the video privacy settings? I think that is provided here, the link to that as well. Then we are talking about the guidelines for the supporting one pager. And solution feasibility matrix is here. And this is basically all the additional sources of data that we have. And this is the link to the reference document. So when you click on this, you basically go to the reference recommended .dash format that I have been mentioning now. And this was basically this was talking about the EMA webinar. This is the email ID where you can reach out for any kind of queries or clarifications, right? And separately for the case study workshop that we were talking about, that link has been sent on the chat in this meeting as well. I think that would also be available on the Unstop website very soon. So you can also go there and register for that.
Thanks for clarifying that, Ankit. I think this will sort of clarify many of the doubts that were also coming in the chat box. So now switching gears, and we'll sort of focus now more on questions that are coming around the evaluation and the results in general. So this question is around the fact that is there any weightage within the solution feasibility matrix itself?
I think for now it is fair to assume that there is equal weightage for all of these parameters. So I think yes, it is equally distributed across all the 6 parameters that we just identified.
Great. This question is also the general research approach that one should sort of take for the case study itself. So given that there's sort of no access to primary sort of data, do you have any suggestions on how to just source information as such?
Oh, so I can take this one. We would like you to stick to the secondary resources for now. There are enough and more resources in the public domain that you can leverage while you're thinking of your ideas. So you can avoid primary research at this stage. We'll go deeper into it as we go into subsequent rounds, but the current public resources should be sufficient as you think of those ideas.
Now this question is sort of forward looking, and it sort of talks about if we can sort of elaborate on PPIs or the finalists itself and the incentives.
Yeah, there's not much to elaborate at this stage right now. The only thing that we are saying that all the finalists, 6 finalist teams who make it to the finale, basically all the 18 members of those 6 teams would get a chance to have a pre-placement interview with Samagra particularly, and a lot more things that are lined up for the finalist teams. But at this point, that's what the pre-placement interview would be about. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Ujjwal and Ankit. I think with this, we sort of round up our Q&A session as well here. And thank you for those. I think they were super informative, and it also gives a reflection that people are engaging with the case study, trying to understand more. So definitely this was a very engaging session. I just want to reiterate the fact, like Ankit mentioned, that we will be hosting a case workshop, which will be conducted by Sagri Handa, who's senior consultant at Samagra, and she will be taking you through how to tackle the case and give you a governance sort of perspective on how one should really tackle governance problem statements. So definitely make sure to register for the same and go sort of have a deeper understanding on that. And in case of any further questions, if any of your questions have not been addressed in this AMA, feel free to drop us a mail at query@thegovernancepchallenge.co.in. Before we sort of close the session, any closing words by Ankit and Ujjwal? Feel free to take the floor.
I think you covered everything, Garima. Thanks for that. And thanks everyone for basically being here, engaging so well, and posting your queries here. I would request all of you basically to do as much secondary research as possible to come up with very relevant solutions for Haryana. The solution matrix has already been laid out. I think that should be a big help for all of you, and use that to stress test any idea that you come up with. Do you think that idea would pass those 6 criteria that we have already mentioned? And finally, just feel free to post all your queries at the email ID that we have mentioned, query@thegovernancepchallenge.co.in, I think, yes. So just feel free to keep posting your queries there, and we would be very, very prompt in answering all of them. So yes, that's it.
And do register for the case study workshop. It will definitely help you understand the context and how to go about the case study better if you kind of attend the workshop as well. So please do register for it.
Thanks for that, Ankit and Ujjwal. I think with this, we close the AMA session for today. Thank you everyone for attending, and just reiterating, attend the case workshop. It will be very useful for you. The deadline for the case submissions for this round are 7th August, 11:59 p.m. So please keep that in mind. And until next time, see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.